Hi, Gerald.
Στεφανία.
Γεια σου, Δημήτρη. Τι κάνετε?
Καλά. Εσύ?
Καλά. Χαίρομαι πολύ που σας βλέπω.
Επίσης.
Και δεν περίμενα να δω τον Gerald.
Ο Gerald είναι τακτικός.
Ναι, γεια σου Ράνη.
Γεια σου Gerald. Γεια σου Στέφη.
Γεια σου.
Hi, Steffi. And hi, Urania.
Hi, Alessandra. How are you?
Hi, Alessandra.
Hi, how are you?
Such a nice people around.
Hi.
Wow.
We are still alive.
Wow, Dimitri, you have a very good group of audience here.
Well,
Nice.
it's nice to see so many friends and colleagues. Teresa Amadon, my God. Hello, Teresa.
Hello, Dimitri. How are you?
I'm very well. How nice to see you are present. How are you? It's ages since we've been in touch.
It has been ages, but I'm doing very well. Trying to stay safe, but I miss Cyprus.
Well, yes. And we miss going out of Cyprus. So.
Hopefully I can come visit soon.
Let's hope so.
Ciao Dimitri, ci siamo anche noi due.
Oh,
Roberto
buonasera, tutti e due.
Sì.
Ciao.
Come va?
Bene, grazie.
Bene.
Buona conferenza. Ciao, siamo qua.
Speriamo, ma tu hai visto cose molto più interessanti di quelle che mostrerò. Ma...
Ho i miei dubbi.
No, sicuramente.
Ciao, buona comunicazione.
Grazie.
Να περιμένουμε 1-2 λεπτά ακόμη, Δημήτρη, και ξεκινούμε. Ναι. Κωνσταντίνα, θα είμαστε έτοιμοι σε 2 λεπτά.
Ωραία.
Καλησπέρα σε όλες και όλους, λοιπόν. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 6th Zoom lecture of the 55th Public Lecture Series, celebrating 30 years of research at the Archaeological Research Unit of the University of Cyprus. It is an honor and my pleasure to introduce to you our tonight's speaker, Demetrios Michaelides, Professor Emeritus of the Department of History and Archaeology of the University of Cyprus and a former Director of the Archaeological Research Unit, having served in this post continuously with genuine enthusiasm and dedication for 18 years, between 1996 and up to his retirement in 2014. We all at the ARU are indebted to him for having managed sufficiently numerous research and administrative tasks and having contributed immensely to what is the ARU or our Monada today. Thank you very much, Dimitri. Professor Michaelides completed his undergraduate studies in the history of European art at the Cortland Institute, University of London. He continued with his graduate studies at the Institute of Archaeology, University of London, and his PhD research at the same institution on the pavements of Roman Benghazi in Libya, obtaining his doctoral title in 1981. Even before he received his PhD title, he taught at the Università per gli Stranieri of Perugia in Italy and worked as assistant director, cultural advisor, and assistant librarian at the British School at Rome between 1974 and 1982. In 1982, he returned to Cyprus and worked at the Department of Antiquities as archaeological officer for the district of Paphos. With the opening of the University of Cyprus 10 years later, in 1992, he became associate professor and in 2000, professor of classical archaeology. He was the first head of the Department of History and Archaeology for 4 years and the director of the Archaeological Research Unit for 18 years. Following his retirement in October 2014, he was awarded the title of Professor Emeritus. He has directed excavations at ancient Berenice, Benghazi in Libya, Otranto in southern Italy, and the Basilica of San Clemente in Rome, as well as that of the houses of Orpheus and of the Four Seasons, and of the baths of the Triton in Paphos. He also carried out numerous salvage excavations of all periods in Paphos and its district. On behalf of the University of Cyprus, he co-directed the survey project Potamia Agios Ozomenos and directs excavation and study of the early Christian site of Agii Pende in Hieroskipou and the Roman house of Orpheus in Paphos. His research interests include Hellenistic and Roman mosaics, wall paintings and terracottas, ancient marble and amphora trade, food and medicine in the ancient world, and the historical topography of Nicosia and Paphos. He directs or is involved in a number of other research projects. One of these, the molding expressions of culture, the terracotta figurines from the House of Orpheus, funded by the A.G. Leventis Foundation, of which he was a principal investigator with Yorgos Papandoniou as research assistant, and Maria Dikomitou Iliadou as special scientist, and others, was one of the 3 programs for the period 2000 to 2014 to receive a special prize for its originality, successful implementation, and results from the University of Cyprus. Having participated in more than 150 international conferences and having given numerous public lectures and research seminars in Europe, the Near East, North Africa, the United States, and Australia, Demetrios, as you can gather, has been utterly active in both research and dissemination. He has published over 170 articles, excavation reports, and encyclopedia entries, and is the author, editor, or co-author of 20 books. He has been on the scientific board of the Oxford Companion to Archaeology, the Encyclopedia of Archaeology in the New Testament World of Oxford University Press, and the Lexicon Iconographicum Mythologiae Classicae. He is a member of the editorial committee and advisory board of periodicals and monograph series, such as the Journal of Hellenistic and Roman Material Culture, Etudes de Travaux, the Studies of Mediterranean Archaeology series of Astrom Editions, the Limites Archaeologies, Histories, Islands and Borders, Ptolemaica, and Studi Cyprioti. Professor Michaelides is the Vice President of the Association Internationale pour l'Étude de la Mosaïque Antique, and after being president for 18 years, he is now President Emeritus of the International Committee for the Conservation of Mosaics. He is the national delegate for Cyprus in the International Society for the History of Medicine and is a member of the board of several national and international foundations and societies. In 1988, he was elected Fellow of the Society of Antiquaries of London. As of 2005, he's a member of the Monitoring Committee for the Conservation of the 6th Century Mosaics at St. Catherine's on Mount Sinai. He was commissioned by the General Secretary of ICOMOS to prepare the reactive monitoring mission and the resulting report on the UNESCO World Heritage Sites of Byblos in Lebanon and Luxor and Karnak in Egypt. For the period 2014 to 2018, he was president of the Cyprus State Scholarship Foundation. In 2015, the president of the Italian Republic conferred on him the title of Grande Ufficiale della Stella d'Italia for his services to Italian culture. Last but not least, in 2019, he was one of the 12 elected founding members of the Cyprus Academy of Sciences, Letters and Arts. Today, he will speak to us about only one of his many research interests and specializations, Hellenistic and Roman funerary wall painting in Cyprus. Thank you, Dimitri. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Thanasi. After this lecture, I hope you give me extra time at the end. Thank you, really. It was unnecessary to say all those things, but thank you very much. If I did all those things, it means I'm getting old. Anyway, let me try. As I said, this is the first time I run the show myself, so let me see how I'm going to do it.
Yep. Press at the bottom of your screen the share screen button. It should be green.
I've done it, but I had this problem before.
Have you opened your PowerPoint already? You should open it first before you can see it on the window appearing at the bottom of your screen after pressing share screen. And then you can choose.
Oh, God. Screen sharing has failed to start, it says. Let me start again.
Okay, make sure your PowerPoint is open and then try again.
Yep.
By pressing share screen. There should appear a window at the bottom, at the second half, the lower bottom of your screen. And you can see the picture of your first slide normally. And if you double click on that, unless you're on another slide, not the first one.
No, I am on my first slide and I can see it, but
just double click on that and then it should appear.
No, I've had this problem when we tried it with Konstantinos, but let me see again. Konstantinos, how did you do it last time?
Κύριε Μιχαηλίδη, βλέπετε στο κάτω μέρος την μπάρα με το Mute Start Video Security.
Όχι.
Νομίζω αν έχετε οτιδήποτε άλλο ανοιχτό, κλείστε το.
Έχω μόνο το μήνυμα σου.
Οκ, και εκείνον κλείστε το. Και πρέπει στο Zoom που είσαστε συνδεδεμένος.
Μα δεν μου ανοίγει το Zoom ακριβώς.
Οκ, τον εαυτό σας το βλέπει.
Λέει μου sign in.
Κανονικά...
Δημήτρη, αφού είσαι μέσα ήδη.
Ναι, το πρόβλημα είναι ότι δεν μπορώ να το ανοίξω την οθόνη.
Δεν βλέπετε καθόλου το Zoom, δηλαδή ούτε τον εαυτό σας ούτε το Θανάση.
Είπα σε ένα άλλο παραθυράκι, σε άλλο το παραθυράκι. Κοίτα από κάτω, στην ταινία από κάτω και πάτα πάνω στο κουμπί που λέει, που έχει ένα μπλε κουμπί με μια κάμερα.
Ήβρα σε σένα.
Οκ, εντάξει. Τώρα δες το share screen από κάτω.
Ναι, άνοιξα το.
Ωραία, περίμενε, παίρνει λίγη ώρα να φορτώσει.
Α, γι' αυτό.
Ναι, ναι.
Να πατήσω το share εδώ.
Ναι, πάτα share
ναι.
screen. Ωραία, τώρα ξεκινά. Οκ, τώρα πρέπει να βρεις το PowerPoint σου.
Μα αφού το άνοιξα το PowerPoint.
Πήγαινε εκεί, ναι. Φαίνεται είχε κλείσει. Ξανά άνοιξε το. Ποια είναι η διάλεξη. Οκ, και τώρα πάτα slideshow. Ωραία, έτοιμος.
Okay.
Πίσω όμως, πήγαινε πίσω στην πρώτη, προχώρησες. Εντάξει, έτοιμος.
Apologies, but as I said, this is the first time I'm doing it myself. So here we are. So hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this evening's lecture. I will start by clarifying that although the title of my lecture is Hellenistic and Roman Funerary Wall Paintings in Cyprus, I'm only going to talk about tombs in Paphos. Many of the tombs I will discuss were excavated with the help of volunteers like Aristodimos Anastasiadis, Clelia Arviniotou, and Pamela Davenport, all of whom I thank wholeheartedly. Neoptolemus Demetriou of the Department of Antiquities was my right hand during my years in Paphos, and he continues to support all the work I do in Paphos. I would also like to thank the director of the Department of Antiquities for permit to study some of these tombs, and of course, all the people that excavated them. And I am grateful to Stathis Raptou, who provided me with great generosity many photographs that I'm going to use tonight. I have chosen to speak to you about a rather neglected aspect of Cypriot archaeology. Up to the late 1970s, the only known noteworthy examples of Cypriot tomb painting were the well-known 6th century BC tomb 60 excavated by Vassos Karagiorgis in Salamis, and the two Hellenistic tombs at the locality Ammi of Paphos, used as stables until the late Kyriakos Nikolaou cleared them in the early 1960s. Fortunately, most tombs are rock cut and have not collapsed. And because of the way the painted surface is applied onto the wall, even when the paint gets detached from the walls, it is usually, but not always, fairly easy to put together. The number of known painted tombs started increasing after the Turkish invasion of 1974 and the consequent rapid development, tourist rapid development of Paphos, and the large-scale rescue excavations carried out first by Sophoklis Hadjisavvas, then by myself, and more recently by Stathis Raptou. As a result, we now have a good sample of this particular and largely unknown art. Why do I call it a largely unknown art, and why particular? Even an enlightened visitor to Paphos is not aware of the existence of these tombs. This is understandable since the tombs are invisible, so to speak. They are not mentioned in guidebooks, and even if they were, they are inaccessible. This is also understandable since practically all of them lie under buildings, hotels, restaurants, and all the sprawl, the tourist sprawl of Paphos. For security reasons, the tombs are kept under lock and key, and one needs to apply to the Department of Antiquities to obtain permission to visit. And I add here that despite this inconvenience, I wish that all the tombs, painted or not, were locked instead of turning into rubbish tips for the neighborhood. Furthermore, and this is not a criticism of the Department of Antiquities that does all in its power to ensure the well-being of these monuments, I believe that a long-term strategic plan needs to be drawn up on how to protect these extremely fragile works. The obvious deterioration of the painted surface is often alarming, and as is the loss of crucial detail in many of the paintings. Also, many of the photographs we use were taken a long time ago. The slides that have been turned into digital photographs, but the quality is not of the right quality, and we need a proper photographic campaign done at regular intervals to control the state of these paintings. And why do I call it a particular art? So far, none of the known examples of painted tomb decoration can even begin to compare with the artistry and finesse of domestic decoration. Like that, for example, from the house of Aeon, excavated by the Polish mission, and others like fragments from the house of Orpheus. It is not a matter of iconography or decorative repertory, but more a matter of style and artistic skill. I would not go as far as to say that what we have in tombs is close to what Ranuncio Bianchi Bandinelli called arte plebea or arte popolare, but these decorations are clearly intended to be received and appreciated by ordinary people. So far, we know of about 30 painted tombs in Paphos. This is only a minute fraction of the thousands of tombs excavated in the area, since only large chamber tombs were decorated with paintings, and even then, only exceptionally. As you can see on the map, the tombs are found all around the ancient city walls, going a fair distance all the way uphill to modern Ctima and on top of the Paphos Plateau. I will be referring to the tombs with their nicknames rather than the inventory numbers, as it is a lot easier, for me at least, to remember Silver House Tomb 1 rather than Tomb 2892. The painted tombs are mostly Roman and attributable to the period from the late 2nd, early 3rd to the 4th century AD. They could be entirely covered with paintings or have only a small part around a specific loculus or arcosolium painted in this way. Unfortunately, it is impossible to date them more precisely, since being large, they were used again and again in antiquity, and they were easily spotted by tomb robbers more recently that have thoroughly looted and disturbed them. The result is that in most cases, we cannot tell if the decoration belonged to the first burial or one of the burials that followed. In Tomb 2 at Ammi, the sequence of the two phases is clear, not their exact date. The original late Hellenistic tomb was a square chamber painted all around with Corinthian columns topped by an Egendard molding. I know it's difficult to see, but each vertical wall has remnants of a column on it, which I hope you can make out. The whole decoration simulated a peristyle court with burials between the columns. It was used in Roman times when two arcosolia were hewn out of the back wall opposite the entrance, changing the whole concept of the original architecture and decoration. But we cannot date either one or the other with precision. For all the above reasons, lack of visibility, poor preservation, problematic dating, and so on, the funerary wall paintings of Paphos have remained largely understudied and unknown. Aside from some archaeometric studies by Ioanna Kakouli, Fisher, and Roxanne Radpour, and articles on individual tombs, mainly by Sophocles Hadjisavvas, Stathis Radpour, and myself, there have been no synthetic studies of the surviving material, save an article I wrote ages ago on ceiling decoration, and more recently, an article by Radpour on the tombs he himself excavated in Paphos. I'm pleased to say that things are looking up. Vasiliki Androu, who did her thesis with me on tomb architecture during the Hellenistic and Roman period in Cyprus, included a chapter on tomb decoration and analysis of plasters and pigments. And we are presently finishing a co-authored article of synthesis for the forthcoming issue of Etudes et Travaux. Furthermore, Margarita Quali of the Department of Antiquities has embarked on a PhD examining the tombs found on the Paphos Plateau, several of which are painted. Together with my friend and colleague, Anne-Marie Guimier-Sorbet, we have been studying the Paphian tombs for several decades now, and we have published a number of studies on their architecture and decoration. The idea is that with the collaboration of other interested colleagues, we would lay the foundations for a corpus of the painted tombs of Paphos and Cyprus in general eventually. The first results of our systematic re-examination of a number of tombs will soon appear in the proceedings of the Paphos Conference of 2017. But before I tell you something about these results, let me say a few words about the iconographic repertory of these paintings in general. In the Hellenistic period, the commonest theme is that of a door. This is a false closed door painted in front of the opening of a loculus or a door, which unfortunately alerted tomb robbers to their presence, and as a result, not a single one has come down to us complete. They were all broken by the tomb robbers. What survives is often of very high quality with carefully rendered details of the wooden door and the metal studs, nails, and sometimes the knockers. Similar false doors continue into the Roman period, but the execution, although very impressive in many ways, it's less careful, more sort of rudimentary, let's say. Such painted doors are, of course, common in the Eastern Mediterranean, especially Alexandria, where the inspiration certainly comes from. Another feature of Alexandrian origin is the three-dimensional imitation of architecture of painted plaster and realistically rendered architraves, door jambs, thresholds, and so on were built in plaster and painted over, of course, around the entrance to a given tomb inside a chamber. If the chamber was small and the tomb was situated on one of the sides of the chamber, a very ingenious expedient was used to increase the effect of this facade. The plaster features, and especially the little steps leading up to the threshold, were slightly turned towards the entrance and were also foreshortened. So on entering the chamber, one got this trompe-l'oeil view of the facade of a given burial, which made it, of course, look much more impressive. These optical tricks, this illusionistic architecture is again an Alexandrian characteristic. The most famous example is the tomb at Shapi, which, as you can see, was already in a ruinous state and is almost gone now. And you can see the drawing at the bottom, these false windows, which are slanted with one pane open to give the impression that you are looking at a real window with, as I said, one of the panes open. And to finish with these early tombs, I simply mention Tomb 1 at Amni, which we will see in detail shortly, where amongst several Egyptianizing elements, what stands out are the large panels of imitation alabaster, the Egyptian stone par excellence. In this tomb, we also have exquisitely painted garlands of flowers, and such garlands remain a favorite theme in tomb decoration throughout antiquity. The Roman decorative repertory is generally richer and more varied than that of the Hellenistic one. Historically speaking, the links with Alexandria weakened, and the new political reality brought Cyprus closer to the Eastern Mediterranean. However, I regret to say that the decoration of our Roman tombs does not begin to compare with that of neighboring countries like Syria, Lebanon, and Israel. Is this a true picture, or has a continuous looting and extended exposure to the elements of nature deprived us of similar examples? Given that these tombs, these paintings are contemporary with the splendid mosaics that make Paphos famous, I cannot believe that all Paphians would have been happy to be buried and enter their afterlife in a tomb decorated in this manner. Why we don't have any better quality tombs, we don't know yet. I hope we will find them. One exceptional tomb is now under the artificial waterfalls of a hotel in Paphos. This is a built tomb, the excavation of which I started in the 1980s, but had to abandon for reasons that I can explain at the end of the lecture if you want. The pententives that carried the dome preserve traces, the lower extremities rather, of standing human figures accompanied by attributes. The ones you see has a basket of fruit on the left and a bunch of grapes on the right, which identify the figure as a personification of autumn. So what we have here is a representation of the 4 seasons, one each for each of the 4 pendentives of the dome. This remains the only mythological representation in a tomb so far known in Cyprus, and I still hope that one day I will have the permit and the funds to complete this excavation of this unique tomb. We know of a handful of other depictions of the human figure, but not of mythological character, like this richly dressed and bejeweled lady excavated by Stathis Raptou. She is accompanied by an inscription of the well-known Christi Here formula, indicating that she is the person buried behind these slabs. Unfortunately, her name does not survive. An inscription using a similar formula, set in a tabula ansata, is in one of the silver house tombs that I excavated, preserves the name Markia Neotera Sophron Here, but not an image of the dead woman. Another couple of figures are too fragmentary to offer any further information. I think they're both of women, as is the owner of this name, who I used to think was my namesake, Demetrios, but if you see the remnant of letter after the last I, it could not be an O of either Demetrios or Dimitriou, so it must be a Dimitrias, so it's another woman. So we only have women, very appropriate for today, which is International Women's Day. Other representations with human traits are again female, faces or masks set among decoration of garlands, leaves, and flowers. Garlands, plants, flowers, and fruit, especially pomegranates, because of their symbolism, are widely used in the Roman period. As we have seen, flowers are often realistically depicted, but with the passing of time, they become more and more abstract and simply decorative, often losing all semblance to real flowers. In all cases, however, the intention is the same and is related to afterlife. In the pagan world, flowers evoked the Elysian fields, while in the Christian, they were a reminder of the promised paradise. Birds are sometimes found amongst these vegetal settings, and of them I single out partridges and peacocks, the latter again imbued with symbolic meaning related to afterlife, as I shall explain later on. Other than flowers, by far the commonest depictions are those of objects of everyday use, such as strigils, mirrors, pyxides, containers for various sorts of safekeeping of containers of various sorts for the safekeeping of jewelry and the storing of ointments and cosmetics. There is also an array of larger vessels, some clearly made of metal, others of glass, the large ones presumably containing wine, the smaller ones perfumed oils. Excuse me. It is interesting to point out that most of the objects represented, unguentaria, pyxides, mirrors, strigils, and so on, are for keeping the body beautiful, clean, and perfumed, something that was obviously deemed necessary even in the other world. What I find paradoxical, however, is that exactly the same objects, but real ones this time, were deposited as grave offerings next to the dead body. We now come to the two tombs that we will examine in some more detail. The first is the often mentioned Rocca tomb 1 at Ami. This has been discussed in many publications, but the work we carried out in 2014 and again in 2017 with Anne-Marie Guimier-Sorbet, Giovanni Verri, Alain Guimier, in preparation for the Paphos conference has led to new observations. I will be speaking in the plural, since much of what I will say is the result of our collaborative work. As you will remember, the two tombs, the decoration of both tombs has a lot of floral motifs, but Tomb 1 is particularly interesting because of these alabaster vessels, and the panels of alabaster are outlined in black, and they also have incisions between them, like other elements in this tomb, which underline the architectural character of the decoration. Crowning the veneering is a beautifully executed, colorful garland of leaves and flowers. They are tied together with ribbons and yellow muffs. And in origin, the alabaster slabs run rhythmically all around the chamber, but this effect was spoiled by the opening of side burials in the Roman period, at which time a second chamber was opened in the back wall, which you see on the right. A small detail never noticed before shows that in origin, the back wall had a canonical false door, like the ones we've seen before. Something also supported by the strange turn of the ribbon, which goes the wrong way. It should have been going to the left, but it goes to the right towards the door. Here are the remnants which give us the side of the door with a lintel. The ceiling of the tomb is very poorly preserved, but poor though it is of very special interest. It imitates a woven textile made to look all the more realistic by having the knots of the tassels, the pompons, hanging on the vertical side of the wall. The textile is on the ceiling, but the pompons run vertically. A large red square spangled with creamy-colored 8-pointed stars of the so-called Macedonian type occupies the center of the ceiling. This is framed by a set of decorative bands consisting of narrow fillets of different hues, of different colors, a very damaged blue band seemingly decorated with confronted yellow animals, probably griffins, on either side of a palmette, then a band with a pattern of serrated squares characteristic of woven textiles like kilims, another set of fillets, the already mentioned triangular blue tassels, and finally, on the two edges of the ceiling without tassels, we have this band preserving really very, very poor remains of green and red of what seems to be probably a vegetal scroll. The scrutiny of the tomb and its paintings, the close examination, and the photographic methods used have allowed us to understand what all these elements mean, but because of time constraints, I will only talk about a few details. Apart from the already mentioned incisions on the plaster underlining the architectural articulation of the decoration, there are many much fainter incisions guiding the curves of the festoons of the garlands and many other features of the decoration. I doubt if you can see them in the photographs, maybe the lower one is a bit clearer, but they are really all over the tomb. Furthermore, there are other incisions which seem to divide the tomb in sections, nothing to do with the decoration, but just dividing the decoration in sections, presumably for organizing the work, not drawing it out, but organizing it. Real iron nails were spotted in the places where the fictive ones were painted, and this is presumably for hanging real garlands, not only the painted ones, but during the burial, there were probably real garlands hanging from there, or even other objects, which we know from elsewhere and from representation. And such nails have now been spotted in several tombs in Paphos near the entrance for hanging perhaps curtains or anyway, and near garlands. All this is more or less visible with the naked eye and the use of oblique lighting. But now, relatively new methods for capturing and treating images have revealed a lot more. These were carried out by Giovanni Verri and Alain Guimier, who used photo-induced luminescence imaging developed by Giovanni Verri at the British Museum for the characterization of Egyptian blue. LAB, or lab color space treatment, was also used. For those of you who might not know, Egyptian blue, or calcium copper silicate, is considered to be the first synthetic pigment and was in use for thousands of years up to the Roman period, when it was known as caeruleum. It appears that it was forgotten during the Dark Ages, and with it, the recipe for preparing it was also lost or forgotten. The first method used showed that Egyptian blue was generally used in the garlands and elsewhere, and it is often found in areas where the color is invisible. This is because Egyptian blue was mixed with other colors also. So if the color goes, we are left with the Egyptian blue, which is spotted by these methods. The method was quite revealing on the vegetal extensions on either side of the woven textile, where one can now see clearly two undulating and intersecting leafy stems creating ovals, the centers occupied by what look like small oval objects. And I'll come to this again. The lab method was more revealing on the blue band with mythical creatures. The animals now we know are certainly griffins, and we can now define their type with more precision. And I thank Anne-Marie for the minute description of these animals, mythical animals, which are one of her speciality. They are lion griffins with a ruffled mane and shell-like wings. They have long sinus tails with the volute turning away from the body. And they stand in heraldic pose, one of their front legs raised and the head lowered, expressing respect to the object set between them. This is not a palmette, as we thought before, but rather a naturalistically rendered flower, which is sometimes seen from the side and sometimes in three-quarter view. We have already stated in several publications that the ceiling imitates a rich woven textile, a type already known from several examples in Macedonia and Alexandria. The two extensions with the leafy ovals are too poorly preserved to allow a satisfactory interpretation. But we can now say something about the oval objects inside them. One, just discernible with the naked eye, is red. The other, revealed through inflorescent photography, is blue, and they both have a light, faint outline. These, we propose, evoke precious stones set in gold, as those known from painted representations, like the coffered ceiling here in Tomb 5 at Amfushi, and also known from real examples, admittedly later, like these jewels set in gold that were decorating the walls of the Horti Lamiani in Rome. The elongated triangles of the tassels are found in the Maison d'Escaut on Delos, while the 7-fillet band is an imitation of a torus molding, an imitation also found in a tomb at Anfushi, again and again at the Maison d'Escaut of Delos. The next band with the serrated squares, the Kilim type weave, is a characteristic motif resulting from weaving. The motif, practically identical, is found again at Anfushi in Alexandria and the tomb of Lyson and Callicles in Macedonia. The yellow griffins and flowers painted against a light gray-blue background indicate that they were made of gold. They could have been part of the weave, or they were golden appliques attached onto the textile. Finally, the central red square of the textile is decorated with beautifully sort of regularly set stars on an oblique grid. They are pale green, pale cream, and their raised thickness may indicate that this is not the original color, but rather the foundation for the application of gold leaf. If such were the case, in the real textile depicted, these would have again been appliques applied onto the textile, the same as the golden griffins. The decoration of this tomb is of the highest quality, and there is no doubt as to its symbolism. The dead lies under a woven baldachin and is accompanied by garlands, painted and real ones, all underlining his heroized state. This is also found in Macedonian tombs, like the one of Lyson and Callicles, and in Alexandria, in the tomb of Sidi Gaber, and of course of Anfushi that we have already seen, but none of this reaches the artistry and refinement of the Paphos painter, and this is obvious despite the very bad condition of the paint. The second tomb we re-examined using the same methods in preparation for the Paphos conference was discovered in 1981 during the building of a hotel. It was excavated by Sophocles Hadjisavvas and published by him with great efficacy the following year. As you can see, the tomb was found with the roof collapsed, looted, and badly disturbed. It is certainly one of the best Roman tombs preserved on the island in respect to both its architecture and decoration, and Hadjisavvas rightly dates the original construction to around the mid-2nd century AD. The dome had collapsed during the building operations for the hotel and was quickly reconstructed. But the reconstruction raises certain questions in the sense that there are no pendentives and no proper definition of the shape or a central keystone for the dome. None of the stone blocks forming the dome carry any traces of painting, although Hadjisavas mentions that plaster fragments found between the arcosolia show that the whole construction was once covered with floral designs in a wide range of colors. In this respect, a loose trapezoidal block visible in photographs taken at the time of excavation is of particular interest. This block, survives intact, and its particular shape and chamfering led us to assume that it formed part of the lower circumference of the built dome, something that has now been confirmed by measurements taken by Luigi Barazzetti of the Politecnico of Milan, and above all by the architect Christopher Papadopoulos in Paphos, to whom I owe this reconstruction and to whom I extend my sincere thanks. The larger curve of the block sat on the wall at a level just above the arcosolia, the chamfer on the narrower side intended to take the next block of the dome. The block may have belonged to an earlier dome that had collapsed and was rebuilt in the manner we see today, in antiquity, I mean. But it certainly fits absolutely right on top of the arcosolia. So perhaps it is an earlier phase. The concave face of the block is covered with a layer of mortar, preserving traces of color and faint, very faint incisions consisting of two painted red bands and faint circular motifs between them. Against the white background, there are traces of red and green, seemingly from a vegetal scroll, perhaps adding to the evidence that Hadjisavas has preserved, that the tomb was full of fragments with floral designs. The burial opposite the entrance was clearly the most important, since the tympanum and moldings of the arcosolium, as well as the front of the sarcophagus, carry painted decoration. Despite the very interesting new observations made on all this, especially the moldings around the arcosolium, time does not permit me to go into them. I will simply point out the rich and beautifully executed garland in the tympanum and concentrate on the front of the sarcophagus. Hadjisavas mentions that the decoration here includes a dog, a poorly preserved fish, a throne, a box-like item, and a bird. And this is more or less what is visible to the naked eye, and it's all correct, of course. With the use of photo-induced luminescence and lab, we can now see several new details which prompt us at a possible interpretation of the decoration. We start on the left, where a dog runs to the right towards a box-like object, which we can now see that it is a half-open casket, probably a pyxis of some sort, with little round feet, suspended by nail and thread from the wall, painted, of course. Nothing makes sense in the next section of the front, certainly to the naked eye. However, photo-induced luminescence has now revealed a well-defined peacock walking to the right towards an invisible object in the center. This we now know, question mark, we now know or rather we think we know, is a vase with a white mouth. I think in the lower photograph, you can just make it out. It's sort of bell-shaped. And the colors on the left of the rim, a bit lower down, probably an indication that there was a vegetal shoot coming out of it, which is normal in such decoration. Prompted by this, we propose that a similar bird was symmetrically represented on the other side of the vase, where we can now see remnants of eyes of the peacock's train, again, through this photography. And of course, this symmetrical arrangement gives us the well-known composition of confronted birds on either side of a vessel. We skip for the moment the next object and move to the last representation on the right, where we can now see that the hardly visible gray-blue patch belongs to a beautifully rendered bird with pointed beak and longish tail. The object to its left, the one I just skipped, has been identified as a throne, and it certainly looks like one, or rather like the Roman chair known as a solium. The two images on the left show solia. Two limestone thrones in the round, of which you see one on the right, looking very much like the Paphos object, have been found in a Roman tomb near Cologne in Germany. However, this object remains perplexing, since seats of any sort do not have a known role in funerary iconography. However, the rest of the decoration seems to form a coherent whole. The confronted peacocks on either side of a vessel in the center is one of the commonest features of funerary decoration. Apart from the bird's general symbolism of wealth and good luck, the ancients believed that the flesh of the peacock was incorruptible. And because the bird regrows its feathers every year, it became a symbol of renewal and, in Christian times, of resurrection. At the two opposite ends of the sarcophagus front, we have a dog on the left and a bird on the right. Dogs have a chthonic significance. Cerberus, guarding the kingdom of the dead, was a three-headed dog. The dog attends on other underworld divinities, such as Pluto, Serapis, and Hecate. However, we must not forget that dogs and birds represented in funerary context are usually the familiar animals or pets of the deceased, and there are numerous stelae, above all of children and adolescents, both boys and girls, where these pets are represented. Caskets point to a feminine world, and as we have seen, they are often found as tomb offerings and painted on the walls of the tombs. The chair throne remains problematic. Oh, sorry. I shouldn't have moved. The chair remains, be the chair or a throne, remains problematic. Although in a funerary context of the Roman period, a chair could, with a stretch of the imagination, be symbolic of marriage. And the fact that it is empty could imply a marriage that never actually took place. So, given all the other objects of a feminine character we propose that the occupant of the sarcophagus was an auros, a young woman who died before her time without getting married, of course. As you have seen, the funerary paintings of Paphos do not hold any great masterpieces. I believe, however, that they need to be studied further, and this is what we have started doing with Anne-Marie. I have discussed the last two tombs in some detail, simply to show that careful re-examination and modern techniques can reveal an awful lot on the iconography, the beliefs of the ancient Paphians, as well as on the painting techniques used. Furthermore, despite centuries of looting that ravaged the antiquities of Paphos, not only the tombs, all the antiquities, the ancient city still holds surprises, like this superb tomb recently found by a bulldozer and excavated by Margarita Quali, whom I thank wholeheartedly for the permission to use these photographs and show them for the first time. Who knows, one day we may find the top quality painted tombs we are still missing in Paphos. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dimitri, for this fascinating new detail, sharing with us this fascinating new detail, and such a rich overview of the tombs of Nea Paphos and their painted decoration. You to most of us, certainly to myself. It is indeed such rich visual material which can be approached in many different scientific methods and theoretical approaches, and I'm sure that the discussion that will follow will reward us in those respects. Let me also comment one of the things you mentioned earlier. Although we all see you as our father figure at the unit, you will never get old.
Oh yes, thank you very much.
Your enthusiasm in approaching the archaeological material is that of a 25-year-old. So
you're very kind.
It's the truth, and I'm sure many people believe that, share this idea. Anyway, I will quickly check, so please bear with me, our chat. So let me remind you that you can use the chat function to type your question, or raise your hand, or unmute your microphone and switch on your camera to address a comment or question directly to our speaker. I think we, no.
Sorry.
I
Yes.
see Christopher Papadopoulos, who did the reconstruction, and thank you, Christopher, for doing the dome.
No worries, Dimitri.
We do have a question, Dimitri, already, by Elena Ipogachi-Richter. She says that she thinks she saw in one of your first slides some Kioniski integrated in a wall. Is that true?
Painted or real ones?
Well, by saying
no, the only thing that might be taken are not painted, she says. No, there aren't any.
Okay. Another question by Luis Hierodiacono. I gather most of the tombs are covered up underground?
Yes. All the tombs are underground. They were underground in origin anyway, most of them. And this is one of the reasonable solutions for preserving these tombs, which are just about everywhere in the town, that you don't need to expropriate a plot of land to preserve a tomb, but you can preserve it underground, under the building, because they were underground anyway.
I will agree with Dimitris, because I live in Paphos, and under my house there is 2 tombs.
We've
They are
seen one of
preserved.
them tonight. Yes, we've seen one of them tonight. The only thing is, as I said, if they are not closed and maintained, they tend to get full of rubbish. And the Department of Antiquities does all it can, but it cannot go around cleaning tombs throughout the city. It's the responsibility of the citizens. The other thing is to just close all the tombs completely. But of course, you cannot close them with a ceiling door because you would create humidity problems inside. So it has to be a grill door, which lets rubbish get in through wind, dust, everything. So it is a problem. It's a very big problem, how to look after tombs, painted in particular.
Yeah, well, there is a related question afterwards, but let's look first at what Notakuru is asking you. Would you be prepared to link the representation of peacocks on either side of a floral ornament to the old tradition of the tree of life?
Yes, there is that relation, which of course is picked up by the Christians later on, like we have confronted deer, confronted peacocks around on either side of the tree of life. So there is a relation. It's an ancient tradition that carries on. It's not necessarily a tree as it evolves, but it's a central feature with confronted animals or birds on either side, paying respect more or less to whatever is in the middle.
Thank you, Dimitri. And Thula Vasiliades asks whether the garlands and columns of the Amoy tomb, well, she says that they're very similar to the ones that they have found on the western Parodos wall of the Paphos Theatre. And she's asking whether you think it could be the same workshop producing them.
Yeah, I'm aware of those, of the paintings that were published from the Paphos Theatre. They are quite similar. I cannot tell if they were painted by the same workshop. What I can tell is that some of the tombs that I have studied were painted by the same workshop because they use exactly the same motifs. And it's usually the decorative motifs, not the representations, that indicate the signature, so to speak, of a workshop.
Yeah. Haluk Chetinkaya asks, was there any chemical analysis concerning the pigments so that the origin of the material can be traced, which may lead to different origin of the pigments?
Yes. There have been, as I mentioned at the beginning, some archaeometric studies and analysis, mainly led by Ioanna Kakouli, which have given us several answers. Also, Vasiliki Lysandrou, for her thesis, analyzed both pigments and plasters, but there is still a lot to do. And of course, what you find in one tomb does not necessarily mean it's the same as in another tomb. But certainly from what has been done up to now, Egyptian blue is ever present, not only in tombs, but in all paintings in ancient Paphos. And the rest of the pigments are what you would expect, cinnabar for red, red ochre, of course, which we have plenty of, yellow ochre, terra verde, which is again a local soil, a local pigment, calcium carbonate for the white, and charcoal for the black. There are others, of course, but these are the basic. And there are other mixtures of paints, of colors to make specific hues not easy to find.
Sure. Okay. Another question from Mona Aswani. The star sign, the star motif, which is also represented on coins, as in tombs, does it have the same meaning?
It's a very big question. The so-called Macedonian star, there was an awful lot of discussion some years back because it has taken on a nationalistic symbolism. I don't believe the so-called Macedonian star is indicating anything in particular. It is a decorative motif that just happened to be popular in Macedonia, and not only. Here it is in Cyprus and in many other places. I think it's a decorative motif, popular in those days.
Okay, yeah. Martina Stolfi asks, well, she refers to the representation of alabaster, which is the only marble type represented in the painted decoration of Paphos or in Cyprus in general. If so, can you elaborate as to why is it the only one? Is it because alabaster was more prestigious than other stones, or is it related to a relationship between Egypt and Cyprus?
The tomb at Ami has the best rendering of alabaster, but we have alabaster imitation elsewhere in other tombs and also in the Roman period, although the quality is not of the rendering is not so good. The early good examples must be related to Egypt, to Alexandria. This is a time when Cyprus is part of the Ptolemaic world. So it's natural that we have influence from there. Also, Cyprus does not have beautiful marbles of the kind of its own. They were always imported and always very expensive. This is why you have them imitated. In Alexandria, you have the famous tomb, which is entirely built of gigantic blocks of alabaster. Well, something like that is inconceivable in Cyprus, so they have imitation.
Yeah. Leonardo Cancelleri. Well, I think this is a comment. The peacock representation in Byzantine art is usually explained by the influence of Sassanid art. In this case, we have these representations in a period in Cyprus before this influence should have taken place. Rania Mikhail is also has a related question. Are there any painted tombs in Paphos with a clearly Christian character?
Yeah. The first one. Yes, we associate peacocks with the East, and certainly in Byzantine art, the Sasanian influence is what is often underlined. The thing is that we have peacocks all the time. They change meaning, although they always had this specific meaning of the uncorruptible flesh and renewal. Don't forget that the peacock was Hera's, the goddess Hera's bird. We have in Roman art beautiful statues of peacocks, confronted peacocks. So yes, there was a renewal, let's say, of the peacock fashion, and maybe the rendering coming from the East in later times, but peacocks and confronted peacocks were known from before and used. Mm-hmm. And the second question was about, from Rania?
From Rania Mikhail.
Yeah.
About Christian motifs, yeah.
not only Christian motifs, but Christian objects do not exist in Paphos. It's an over-exaggeration, but I have excavated, not by choice, nearly 1,000 tombs in Paphos. And apart from a handful of clay lamps with what can be interpreted as Christian motifs and a couple of coins, I have found nothing that looks Christian. Where did the Christians bury their dead? We don't know. I think they stopped putting grave goods with them. They just reused again and again the big tombs without grave goods. This is why we don't find them. It's only when we get to the period with glazed pottery that you find Christian burials with pottery. And then you know the date is clear because of the pottery, but not before.
In case they reused ancient tombs, wouldn't they bother about the decoration? Would they leave it as it is? Would they cover it? Are there any traces of such activity?
The tombs of the kings, some of the tombs in the town of Paphos, the tombs of Anavargos, not far from Paphos, they all have crosses on top of the arcosolia. They Christianize them by making crosses either inside or painted.
Fine. Yolanda Minarchik is asking whether you see any parallels to the Roman funerary relief sarcophagi of the 2nd, 3rd century in the frieze with the dogs and the objects as the casket, the chair, etc.
Well, yes and no. I do see some parallels, of course, but the rendering of the sarcophagus front is very particular. For example, the objects, animals, are set paradoctically at their own scale. They bear no relation to each other. The dog is smaller than the casket. The chair is almost as big as the little bird on the right. So it seems to be just a collection of features which, if we are right, have this symbolic meaning. But it's not a composition as such, like that you would get on a sarcophagus, a relief sarcophagus front.
Okay. Kostas Konstantinou next. He asks, do the images and visual representations of the Paphos tomb prove to be the result of religious syncretism of the Hellenistic and Roman periods?
Difficult to answer. Yes, religious syncretism seems to be around all the time. But you know, one of the most difficult things in the study of Cypriot archaeology are the transitional periods, from the kingdoms to the Ptolemies, from the Ptolemies to the Romans, from the Romans to the Arabs and the Byzantines. There is always this blurred period between them with no clear definition of one and the other. And yes, there was syncretism, but we cannot define how this appears, especially since in the tombs we cannot date them, which is even more difficult.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah. Maria Iakovou next, she asks, what is the earliest confirmed use of Egyptian blue in Cyprus? Do we know?
Ami tomb that I know of, the tomb one at Ami. If it dates to the late 3rd, 2nd century BC, it's the earliest that I know of. But of course, Egyptian blue was used for a variety of purposes, even for pottery, So I don't know of analysis made of earlier pottery, even pottery of Egyptian origin that we have in Cyprus, which could easily have Egyptian blue in it, but I don't know the earlier period.
Okay, fair enough. Well, a related question by Alessandra Giulia Mair. Are the analysis of the pigments published, the ones you carried out?
The ones that Ioanna Kakouli and her team did are published. If you want, I can send you the bibliography. The ones that Vasiliki Lissandrou did will be published in the article we should finish next Tuesday, which is tomorrow.
Fantastic. Okay, it's coming soon. Dimitri, may I ask a question? It's related to the garlands, to the real garlands that they may have decorated the tombs with during the actual burial. Since I know that you're a lover of Cypriot flowers and plants, have you done any research? I know there are references, written references to the use of flowers in this context, but in specifically about Cyprus, do we know if that did happen in the tombs, what kind of flowers or plants would they use? Have you looked at the iconography? Does it tell something?
I have looked at iconography. Flowers are very difficult to identify. Some of them, you know, an orange blossom, if it's slightly larger, can look like an anemone. So it's really very difficult, but it's easier to do it with fruit. And we have fruit, as I said, we have pomegranates, a variety of fruit, pine cones, which are also symbolic for rebirth, also appear. And of course, when you have pine cones, you have pine needles, so you know they go together. But you are right, it's a field I should look into much more. From Egypt, of the later period, of course, not the pharaonic period, there are finds of real plants under the body of the dead. So there they can be easily identified, but not in Cyprus so far.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yes, there is obviously, Dimitris, plenty of messages, personal messages, congratulations and thanks from many of our attendees. I hope you will have the time to scroll down and read each one of them. In the meantime, I would like to remind you that there will not be a public lecture. There will not be a Zoom lecture next Monday. Monday the 15th is Clean Monday, Green Monday, or Ash Monday for us, for the Greek Orthodox calendar. So it's a public holiday, so we will not be holding a public lecture. So the next one will be in 2 weeks' time on March 22nd, and it's actually by myself on the Byzantine and historical archaeologies of Greece and Cyprus. So keep that in mind, so that so that you know there will not be a lecture next Monday. Right. Well, it's already 9 o'clock, so we've had such a wonderful presentation and such a equal stimulating discussion, Dimitri. So thank you very much for this. And I would like to ask all our attendees to, if they wish, to switch on their camera and microphone, unmute their microphone and say hello and good night to you on a personal note.
Πολύ ωραία, ευχαριστούμε.
Thank you, Dimitri.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ. Πολύ ωραία.
Ευχαριστούμε, Δημήτρη.
Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ από τη Βαρσοβία.
Ευχαριστώ.
Καλό βράδυ.
Σας ευχαριστούμε πολύ.
Εγώ σας ευχαριστώ.
Ευχαριστούμε και τους διοργανωτές. Να είστε καλά όλοι.
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ.
Thank you and good night from Liverpool.
Bye bye.
Ευχαριστούμε. Καληνύχτα.
Γεια σου, Πίτρο.
Grazie di tutto. Era bellissimo.
Grazie a voi.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Δημήτρη και από την Κρήτη. Και από την Κρήτη.
Γεια σου, Βίκα. Τώρα σε αναγνώρισα.